A growing number of countries are working to get Russia on the table for peace talks with Ukraine. Representatives of more than 80 countries held talks in Davos, seeking common ground on a peace formula for the Russia-Ukraine war. Though the Swiss co-host did admit that the inclusion of Russia in discussions was not going to be an easy task. The talks in Davos aim to build on previous such closed-door efforts as well. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelinsky is set to attend the World Economic Forum's annual meeting that starts Tuesday. The Ukrainian leader's endeavor will be to keep up international focus on Ukraine's defense, and this comes amid eroding support for Kyiv in the West, as well as distractions like conflict in West Asia. My name is Hemkor Saroya, and to discuss this, I'm being joined by Ben Aris, founder and editor-in-chief of BNE Intellinews, and also former Moscow bureau chief for the Daily Telegraph. So thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure to be here.
Over 80 countries held talks on Sunday for a peace formula in Ukraine. However, they do admit that getting Russia on the negotiating table is not going to happen anytime soon. How effective do you think these talks are or can be without the presence of Russia?
Well, they can't be effective without Russia. I mean, you can't do a peace deal without one of the belligerents sitting at the table. So, I mean, clearly the West is getting tired of this war. America last week announced that it's sent its last military aid package and it's out of money. And we're still waiting for Congress to vote through a new allocation. And 61 billion is being discussed, but it's not arriving. And it seems on the Western side that the fatigue has grown to the point where they want to finish this conflict. And you've got multiple other conflicts breaking out. You've got Hamas, Israel in the Middle East. You've got the Houthi that are firing rockets at tankers going through the Red Sea. Now you've got a military campaign by the States and the UK bombing in Yemen. And it's all getting a bit much, if you ask me, that the Ukraine conflict needs to stop as far as the West is concerned. But starting those peace talks is going to be extraordinarily difficult. I mean, first thing is getting Russia to the table, and the second thing is the starting positions of the Ukraine and Russia are very far apart, in so much as Russia's insisting that Ukraine recognize the 4 regions that it annexed last September and the sovereignty over Crimea. And Zelinsky's starting point is that he's not going to talk to Russia until all the Russian troops leave the whole territory of Ukraine, including Crimea, and that's not going to happen either.
All right, now Zelensky does face the Herculean task of bolstering waning international support for Ukraine, given the complex geopolitical scenario and the attention being diverted, as you mentioned as well, to the war front in West Asia. What is your take on this? Do you think he will be able to bolster support?
He's going to go to Davos and he's going to ask everyone to give him more arms and funding, air defense in particular. That the American aid, the military aid has been supplying, a crucial part of that is more ammunition for the air defense, particularly Patriot missiles. And Ukraine, according to a US military assessment, will start running out of those rockets this month or into February. And then it's exposed, and then all of its cities become vulnerable again. The air defense has been very effective. It's taking out some 80% of the inbound missiles, but without new ammunition, then all the cities become exposed. And in particular, the power stations, the heating stations, become exposed. And Russia clearly has a strategy of plunging Ukraine into the dark. And now it's the coldest months of the year, and this year is actually particularly cold. And that would be disastrous if Ukraine runs out of ammunition. So he's going to go there and ask for more of that. He signed a security deal with the UK at the weekend, which promised £2.5 billion, and particularly more arms, more ammunition. And the Ukrainian team is now actively pursuing these security guarantees with at least 9 other countries, including the US. So some deal probably will come out of it, and Davos would be the forum for that. But from the Davos side, the Western side, I mean, the call for ceasefire, I mean, that's, I think, a complaint by them. They want to see it end, but I don't see anything practical coming out of it. But more security deals, I mean, this is a good forum to do more of these security deals like the one done with the UK at the weekend. So we'll probably see some more of those.
All right, now, of course, you've touched on this. In fact, I was just going to come to this. Without international aid, how do you think Ukraine is positioned at the moment to sustain this fight against Russian invasion?
Well, it's quite clearly shifted ground. For the last 2 years almost, it's been very dependent on deliveries from NATO. And the problem there is NATO has now depleted its stocks of arms, ammunition, etc. And what's shifted since September last year, when they had a defense industry conference, is the emphasis is going to be on Ukraine building its own arms production. And that's very clearly coming out now. There's a lot of talk about industrial parks and investment into putting up these factories so it can produce its own shells, its own tanks, its own missiles, its own ammunition. That's going to be a difficult process. I can't see that sort of coming to fruition before 1 year, by the end of this year. However, that process has started, and I think given everyone's now assuming this is at least a 2-year-long war, then that's the way they're going to go, is they're going to build their own arms manufacturers and supply themselves. But this year is going to be very difficult. Those factories aren't ready, and Ukraine is still dependent on imports of weapons and ammunition from the West. And so I think there's going to be a sense of muddling through, holding the line while all this stuff is put in place.
Right. Now, the role of China and its ability to help negotiate peace has been highlighted as well. Do you think China, no limits partner Russia, will intervene?
I doubt it. China, Xi Jinping has definitely raised the flag on the anniversary of the war. Last year, the Chinese floated a peace plan, but that peace plan more or less just backed the Russian position and called for the conflict to be frozen and effectively Ukraine to be cut in half along the Dnieper River. So I don't think it's going to go anywhere. However, China is definitely in a position as the middleman, but I think it was playing more to the global South audience, saying, look, we're the sensible people here, we're going to sue for peace, we're not getting involved in the war directly. And the other problem is I don't think the West wants to give China the prestige of bringing this conflict to end. Certainly diplomatically it would be quite an elegant solution, but the problem there is the rivalry between the West and China is such, and China is definitely seen as a very strong Russian ally. So I think the West would be reticent, would resist putting China in charge of the peace talks.
Right. Now, on that note, talking of the peace plan here, how likely is it that Zelensky's 10-point formula is accepted? Can we expect peace any time in the near future as this war is nearing its 2-year mark?
Well, like I say, if you look through the 10-point list that Zelinsky put forward, it's an extreme position. Basically, it says that Russia should stop the war and leave. And then we'll do peace talks, which is not going to happen. However, last April, in March rather, there was a fairly comprehensive peace deal worked out between Ukraine and Russia, which included things like freezing the conflict, putting the Donbass and making an autonomous republic within Ukraine so it stays Ukrainian, but effectively, de facto, it remains under Russian control. And the whole issue, the thorny issue of Crimea, it was agreed just to boot that down the road, and that future generation sort that one out. However, this deal was rejected. It seems to me that the West said, look, we're going to arm you to continue fighting, but if there is a peace, then we're not going to give you security guarantees, which means that you're completely dependent on Putin's promise not to restart the war. And Zelinsky, I think, judged that too big a risk and so decided to continue to fight. And as I said before, we're very far away from beginnings of a peace deal because the basic starting positions of the two sides, the Russians and Ukrainians, so far apart. There's no common ground. There's nothing to talk about. There's no way to reach out.
All right. Well, Mr. Aris, thank you so much for joining us on WION World is One. Always a pleasure to have you. Thank you for your insights on this.
Me too. All the best.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.